Hello, hello, and welcome to the Here to Uplift podcast, where we center the stories of impactful changemakers, entrepreneurs, and community leaders who have done the hard work of uplifting themselves through adversity to get where they are today, and now uplift others along the way in their journeys. I'm Lolo Fisher, your host, lover of all things wellness, healing, and empowerment, and I would greatly appreciate if you show us your support by liking, subscribing, and sharing this podcast with others. Let's get into it. All right, y'all, welcome back to the Here to Uplift podcast. I am here with my friend, sorority sister, and business corporate mogul, I'm going to say just for now because I'm putting it out there. Mykle Douglas. Mykle, M-Y-K-L-E, not Michael, which you will find out on the Instagram later. But I'm really excited because we got reconnected unexpectedly.
Yeah.
When I moved to the Bay Area, I was speaking at an event on health is wealth, and we have a mutual friend, shout out to Cindy Pinero, who invited Mykle to that event when we were speaking, and we connected after not seeing each other since Arizona, I believe, right? Where we went to school.
I think that probably had to be, maybe 10 years ago?
Oh my gosh.
Which is crazy.
That's so long ago. It doesn't even feel like it's been that long.
I know. A decade almost, basically.
Okay, so I will say what I remember then versus what I know now and why I'm excited for this podcast. What I remember then is like Mykle is the Texas girl. She's like always super excited to pump up her hometown. Gymnastics. I remember you were on the gymnastics teams at U of A, and in general, just you always had so much like bubbly excitement, great energy. I know everybody wanted you to be in the stroll offs every year, and half the time you're like, I'm too busy for all that. And now, just after all that time passed and not necessarily connected maybe through social media, but not necessarily having regular conversations, what I know now is that you work for a huge tech firm, you still work out and are active as heck, girl, and that you still know how to have fun. So I want to fill in all the gaps. I'm excited to hear what we can learn from you today. But why don't you introduce yourself for the people?
Yeah. So as I feel like I'm going to call her Lolo because that's taking us back to Arizona. Yeah. But yeah, it's been a wild and crazy ride. I think definitely gymnastics was a huge part of my life at the age of 3, all the way through college. So full ride. And that it's everything to me for the fact that it's definitely made me into the person that I am today. But yeah, you get past the undergrad, you kind of find yourself into working in what is it that you want to do professionally. And so here I am. And it was one of those like, hey, why don't you try this? Your parents tell you, hey, let me tell you, or what do you think about this? You know, HR, human resources. And of course, nobody listens to their parents. And you're like, I don't want to. And then you end up being there in HR. And here we are, I would say almost 10 years, 11 years in the game in HR, and I'm loving every bit of it. It is truly my profession, and it's my passion. So I will say, listen to your parents, but also at the same time, you got to figure things out on your own. And so I can appreciate kind of taking it on my own. But yeah, definitely from Dallas, love Dallas. That's home. And so to see that I am here in California now, it's a little bit of a different pace. I laugh about it because upon previously working in HR at another company, you have dream companies that you think about. You also have places that you tell yourself, top places I would never live. And ironically, one of those places was California. So
really? Okay, I know you're like Texas girl through and through at heart, but I didn't know you were also like against California. So why?
Yeah.
Why was California a place you didn't want to live?
I mean, I think just initially I've had a few friends that lived in LA, been to LA. I think the first thing you think about is, oh my gosh, this traffic. What is this? It takes all of 30 minutes to go about 1 mile, 2 miles. So that's the first instinct of probably not interested, still not interested. And then you think about the cost of living. And I'm like, no way. There's just no way. If I'm thinking about a place that I want to be able to build my own, California was not on that list. So safe to say those were kind of like my top 2 reasons.
Yeah.
And then you have people that joke like, what about the weather? And I'm like, weather is great, but
I could not do Dallas humidity when I visited. But again, it was only visiting, so I haven't been there year round. But that growing up in California and then switching over and like visiting Texas multiple times, every time my hair was like, hold on a second, what is happening?
It's definitely
like, nobody trained me for this.
Yeah, definitely a readjustment. But yeah, it's ironic. So I think if people ask, like, why are you here? It was an opportunity of a lifetime, and I'm absolutely grateful and thankful for that. It's been a great almost 2.5 years now, being in tech in Silicon Valley. So I absolutely appreciate the experience and the opportunity. But yeah, it's California. It's a different change of pace, but it's something that I don't regret because it's the opportunity and the dream of a lifetime.
So do you see yourself here long term, or even though you're gonna end up back in Texas at some point?
Long term, no. I think this is more of like people have said it's definitely
career season.
It is career season. It's an adventure, it's a journey, and it's been great, and I'm looking forward to continuing on this adventure. But when I think about long term for what I want, I definitely see myself either one, moving back to Dallas, of course. I would do other cities as well. Houston is another. But I'm also open to other areas too. But yeah, it's been good thus far. But definitely it doesn't take the cake if I'm saying California's better than Dallas.
Yeah. We'll see. It's funny because I used to joke, I think it was still in high school even, like my mom would get a little sad about this, but I'd always be like, if I'm not going to live in California, I'm probably going to live in Texas. Like I always had that. And then when it was actually time for me to go to college, right? I want to be out of state so badly. Just wanted a new experience. I want to get out of California. And Arizona is interesting because I do feel like it's University of Arizona was such a mix of I feel like there were more California residents than there were Arizona residents sometimes. Like when I was actually like meeting people, and then we got dashes of the South.
Yep, totally. Dashes. And I think the other part to that is like even looking at Arizona from like a college athlete perspective. Like a lot of the athletes, when you do that breakdown and look at it, it's a big portion of the athletes came from Texas and California. So it was always interesting as you met other athletes in different sports, like connecting with them and building those relationships. It's like, where are you from? You consistently heard, hey, Dallas or Texas, or Dallas or California. So, it's cool though.
Yeah. Okay, so I have some questions on athletes. Yeah, since you just brought that up. So, on college athlete perspective, thinking about being a college athlete, 4 years, right?
Yeah.
4. Okay, so for all those 4 years, how did that prepare you for the workforce and getting into corporate? Because I feel like there could be some correlations there.
Definitely some correlations. And I feel like I think back to like as I've had quite a few HR jobs, like going through the interview process, and that's one of the things some companies really like athletes, and I think that comes down to being an athlete. You think about some of those skills or traits that you have to develop, right? And I think through sports, or specifically for me in my experience through gymnastics, it's time management, right? Like we have practice at 8. So it's like, you got to be up at 7. You go to school after practice and then you come back, practice starts at 4. So kind of like that time management piece. I think the other part there is leadership, right? Like you're on a team. I think so much growing up through high school prior to college, very much of kind of individual type of competitiveness versus when you get to college and you're in that collegiate space, it's all about teamwork, right? So teamwork in the gym, leadership, like how are you leading the team? Like you have your best finishers like on the team that are typically leading in each of those event spaces. So I think about as I transition into corporate, it's, when people ask about those skills and attributes, it's, leadership, it's teamwork, it's collaboration, it's time management. So those are all things I think are so much of transferable, not only in that athlete capacity and space, but in the corporate space. And I think we all go into teams and corporate spaces and we know we have to work. And like any sports team, also corporate team, you're not always going to mesh, right? But it's all about like, how do you persevere through those moments as well? Like you're going to have challenging moments on a sports team. You're going to have challenging moments in the corporate setting, but it's really being able to be agile. How are you able to connect and really to some degree compromise on some of those things that maybe you aren't feeling so great about? So a lot of those attributes I think are very transferable in the corporate space. And so I think going through interview processes with companies, it's really relying back on some of those moments that I can tie back to my gymnastics space, but then also bringing that into my corporate space too.
How do you feel like your the actual physical practice of gymnastics still carries into like your day-to-day at all? Because clearly the soft skills play into your day-to-day work side. What about the physical side?
Honestly, no, not in the workforce. Now, I will say I'm a very competitive person. Okay. So as we do team things at work, whether that's bonding or, extracurriculars, like I feel like you definitely see that like competitive spirit of like, okay, team, like we're not losing. This is why we got we got to get on it. So that's the part that I think like physically, yes, if we're doing things like kickball or top golf, like we do those type of things. And I feel like my team knows like, oh, Mykle's going to be on it, or we do a challenge.
Mykle needs to be on our team.
And everyone's like, oh, Mykle's going to close her rings because like, yes, I am this athlete. Like no athlete loves to lose. You understand that it happens, but it's like, you always want to be on the move. You want to get things done. So in that capacity, absolutely.
And I would even sense the sacrifice piece that you're talking about, because you're talking about how, California is not the dream place for you to live, but you're at one of the dream spaces that you wanted to work. Yeah. So that piece of sacrifice, I definitely hear coming through as well. Yeah.
And I it's crazy. I think over the last few weeks, or for me specifically, like I really thought about, as we continue to get older, I have loved every bit of my 30s. So this has been great. But I do think, like, as people say,
your 30s, girl, you're like low 30s right now.
And I love it though. Like 32 will be 33 in January. Like I've loved every bit of my 30s, and people say like 30s is when like you just get it. Like you're in your groove, you're in your shit, like you're on it. And so I do think that like, as I've thought about it in terms of like, what do I want long-term for me, professionally? But like, yes, I do want a family. I do want to be married. And so those are things, of course, yes, when I think about sacrifice, like what am I willing to give up to say that like, I want to have that person. I want to have that significant other to build a family with. And like, yeah, there may be some cases where I may have to sacrifice my job, but like, I'm okay with that. Like work will be here. And I've loved everything thus far. So I have no doubt that things will work out, because I do believe like everything happens for a reason.
Absolutely. So. I think I said that on the last podcast too. I was like, this is kind of our echoing for the whole season, is everything happens for a reason. It's just figuring out sometimes the why behind it. Okay, so I like this. I was not expecting the college athlete route, so that's why I was like, ooh, okay, let's hop on that real quick before we get into the corporate side and HR. So you said your family kind of already told you from the start, like, Mykle, HR, you should think about it. What was your actual degree in?
So undergrad was a master's in undergrad was a bachelor's in communications with a minor in sports management. Okay. So that was very much of...
Did you have Lehman?
No, Dr. I don't think so. Benson, yes. Yeah, Benson. So I feel like I did that. I wasn't really too sure I feel like we all go to college.
That negotiation class. I was like, I wasn't even sports management, major, minor, anything, but that negotiation class, I was super surprised that I actually kicked butt at it, and I really wish I remembered those things, because now I don't feel like I remember. But Dr. Benzo, great teacher, wherever you are.
Out. But yeah, like I feel like you go to school, you don't really know what you want to do. Yeah. I did have a good time, so I did have to kind of shift majors. Yeah. So if there's anything I will say, just go into a business administration as your bachelor's. Like, just do that. It solves so many more problems for you later on in life. I'm just saying. So I would highly encourage. But yes, was a communications major because I just, was living the college dream. But yeah, I did that, graduated, wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. So I actually ended up moving back to Dallas and ended up with an internship with the Texas Rangers. And so that was in the community space, which was interesting. That was about 8 months or so. Okay. And I feel like after that, I was like, this is not what I want to do. And it's all about those things. Like you try things out and you're like, no, this isn't it. So, then you go back to your parents and they're like, yo, you need to figure something out. Like, and you're like, yeah, whatever. And funny story behind this is because my dad is in sales. My mom is in HR, ironically. So she's like, what about HR?
In corporate spaces?
In corporate spaces, yeah. So she told me that. I'm kind of like, eh. So ended up kind of landing my first like HR job through a connection that my mom had. Okay. And so weirdly enough, was there. This was back in 2013, which sounds so crazy, like December of 2013. And that's where I got my jump into HR. And ever since, like, I had to find my footing in terms of what section of HR I wanted to be in.
Okay. Tell me about this because I don't even realize that there's sections of HR. Tell me more.
Different areas or spaces. So in HR, like one of the things that I can appreciate and I love is that you have different, I would say, different organizations, but different areas of HR.
Okay.
So you have those areas such as like recruiting.
Right.
You have a HR business partner, which is the role that I'm in now. You have benefits, you have compensation, you have learning and training and development. You do now in more spaces, you do hear about I&D, so inclusion and diversity.
Right.
So all of those are different spaces of HR. And so you will see a lot of people kind of figure out and may go into one of those areas. And then through one of those areas, you get exposure to all the different other areas of HR to say, hey, maybe I don't want to do that, but I kind of dabbled in this.
Yeah.
I have an interest. And so you kind of take off from there. And so like that was my initial start. I started in recruiting, was in recruiting for about 3 years or so.
Okay.
Had dabbled with the HR business partners in my space at that time and was like,
that's what I feel like I know the least about. So as you're explaining this, I'm already like, okay, I know these categories, but I think that's the bigger difference between working for a larger corporate company versus a small one. Because when I think HR, I'm like, yeah, I think of all those things, but I imagine it being 1 or 2 people doing all of that. And in these spaces, obviously, y'all got whole teams. So the business partner, right?
An HR business partner, or you may hear an HR manager per se. In those spaces, that is one section. So I'll kind of let you kind of ask, and I can definitely.
Well, yeah, that's just the one I think I'm least familiar with the terminology for. So is this when we're working hands-on with employees or externally?
So it is both. So as a HR business partner or HR manager, like our biggest job is we are truly a partner, thought partner as well, a strategic partner too. So a lot of those you kind of drop and dabble in, but we're partnering with the business. And so you're typically working with anywhere from a C-suite officer or a high-level officer such as like an SVP that reports directly into the C-suite. You're working with them to kind of understand, like, tell me about your business. And I, as your strategic thought partner, am here to support you and your business. And so we have that exposure to not only the business leaders, but the employees. But a lot of what we're doing is building those relationships with the business to help them understand, to leverage us in most cases. A lot of the big things that an HR business partner or HR manager is responsible for are a lot of big people processes. So when you look at like end of year reviews, so when a person writes their review and they get their merit increase, if they get a bonus, if they get RSUs, like that's a big part of my job. It's working with the leaders to understand, how are we assessing performance as an individual? How are they getting awarded? We do want to make sure that they are feeling engaged in their job, that they are, they're feeling valued, right? So like that is a big part. I think the other part is like training and development. How are we equipping not only our leaders, but also their direct reports as individual contributors to say, this is what a typical career path would look like for you. And so it's partnering with the leaders. But I think the other part, I'd say maybe negative, I think typically when you may see an HR business partner coming from an employee perspective, they're like, oh shit, I'm in trouble. Yes. Or something's going on. And it's like, I really work hard to change that perception, because I do understand like there's definitely a negative connotation. And so I really like to build relationships with my managers to say like, hey, if they're telling me like, do you mind coming to a team meeting to just make an introduction to help people understand like, what is it that you do? So that people understand, and then just kind of share like, hey, I am a employee just like all of you are. I just work in HR. But just getting that visibility and exposure to employees across the business lines that I support, so that they understand that I am not only here for your leaders, I'm here for you all. And use me as a tool and a resource. That's what I'm here for at the end of the day.
That absolutely makes sense. And I think that's definitely not talked about enough in external spaces, even because I see a lot of entrepreneurs that are building their businesses wanting to get to these, what we'll say tech giants level eventually, right? And they're not always thinking of these pieces from the start. It's after the fact, when an issue happens, when a problem goes down, and it's like, oh, like, who's our HR person? And then their HR person's like, I was just handling, you know, all the paperwork that we needed at bare minimum, but the people processes and the systems in place to keep people going are just as important to keep a company alive.
Yeah. And I think the other part to that too, it's like you really, really, like, it's being an advocate, and it's not just for the managers, it's for the employees. Like, I want people to have a voice and feel comfortable coming to me, and I'm like, hey, if I don't know the answer, believe me, I will tell you I don't know. But let me find somebody who can help you. Like, I want to make sure that I can do that, because I think it's just that little bit that may make somebody feel like she is a person just like me. And that's the part that I feel like that's why I love this in terms of it being my passion. But it's also like it's the people that you work with, but it's also like I dibble and dabble with being an HR business partner. I talk with a lot of the other HR functions. So recruiting, compensation, training and development. So I do get bits and pieces of being able to do some of those things, which is great. But the reason why I love this specific role is just because every day is different, and I love that. And so I never know what I'm going to do or who I'm going to be talking to, what we're going to be talking about, and no day is the same. And so it continually keeps you on your toes. It is a challenge. I think as you move from different industries as well. Previously, I came from auto finance. Went from auto finance to advisory and research, and then entered into tech. And so you kind of see the differences between each of those industries. But the people are always people, and I cannot say it enough that I talk to my leaders about. I think it's great when people have very strong capabilities in terms of like being very technical. I think that's great. But the biggest part of a leader, it's the people aspect. And so it's all about that feedback, the conversations, the communication. It's all about your people and what do you know about your people? And so that should be at the very forefront of any leader when they're thinking about what is it that I could be doing better? Like, let's talk about your people. What do you know? What do you don't know? How are you helping them improve? How are you helping them grow?
Yes, I absolutely agree with that. I think those soft skills, as we say, soft skills, like, I don't even like that phrase because it makes it sound like I don't really need them. But soft skills are necessary in order to move up. I think you will stay stagnant for your whole life if you don't learn those leadership assets, the soft skills that are like really going to help you figure out how to build yourself and your team. That's too far missed. Like, one of the things is like, okay, there's already the debate of like, is college necessary or not? Right? I'm somebody who really wanted to go to college, went to college, am glad I did, and I still don't believe that everybody has to go to college. I don't think it's the only route to success by any means. However, if you are going to college, why is it not like a requirement to have one of these like leadership courses? Like, we have gen eds. Some gen eds, I'm like, why do I have to take that? But like, that's one of those categories that I'm like, no matter what industry, what major, what field, you're gonna need these skills. And that's what I wish was a gen ed that was like actually required or added, is like leadership and soft skills somehow. Because not everybody has college sports or, you know, getting a job on the side or whatever it is that's going to build it naturally.
And I think sometimes too, like I think about like after like getting into HR, and I think that's at the point where I figured like, this is what I want to do. Like, this is where I want to be. So I decided to go back. I went to grad school, did a dual master's degree program. So got an MBA and then also a master's in HR, because that is like, HR is my life. It's my love. And so I feel like even in those environments, like, I think that's great. Like, because I met a lot of working people that were in their career, whether that was entry into their career, midway, or like very much established. And I think you learn a lot about people in those, I feel like, type of groups and dynamics, because everybody was at such a different part and pace of their life that I think it really gave you perspective of like, you know, I didn't necessarily think about going to college, but then they ended up doing it, and now here they are in their master's degree program, right? But then I also agree too, like, there are a lot of people that I do also know in HR, like, definitely made their start into HR, didn't have a degree, and are very well established in HR now. In officer level roles, high level senior management roles. So
although nowadays it's like required from the start typically.
In most cases.
Versus
that's definitely switched. And I think too, you'll see a lot of like higher level roles are definitely like bachelors. And I think as you typically will go up for more senior level management roles, executive roles, of course, they're definitely, it's not a requirement to have a master's degree, but they like it. I think they also like to see kind of what motivates you, what drives you to kind of get and go after what it is that you want. So it's that perseverance as well to some degree.
Okay, cool. Well, see, you're bringing up things that I think will align with some of these questions I got pulled up. So my boyfriend and I talk a lot about use of ChatGPT lately and AI in general, right? And I don't use it a lot. I'm like, it's there, and I will recommend it to other people when they're like, hey, like, I'm trying to figure out, like, I'm having a brain block. I'm trying to write this article or whatever. And I'm like, just use this to get you started. Like, get something going. Like, my social media manager right now, she will use AI to help generate caption starts. And then I'll fill in the rest. Like, she'll give me a header, and then I'm like, because it just gets my brain going, you know? Based off whatever videos we're posting. So this was an interesting one because I was like, okay, there's a lot of directions I could go with Mykle. And I learned today before this interview that I don't use ChatGPT properly, apparently. So I need to take some workshops or something. But I was just searching things like, you know, maybe top 10 things people would want to know about someone who works in corporate HR. Or what questions they would ask. And it was just coming up with like job interview questions. And I'm like, no, like that's not what I want. And Anthony was like, literally talk to it like you're talking to me. And I'm like, huh? And he's like, tell it, I'm doing an interview. I'm doing a podcast with blank. And this is something about her. And here's a link to her LinkedIn. And I'm like, well, and I'm like, all those details? He's like, whatever you tell me, tell it. And now I'm like, okay, I got some pretty good questions actually, because it pulled up some good things.
I am so curious about these questions because you're gonna laugh at this. Even though I work in tech, I've never used it either.
See, okay,
not once, like, and I'm like, and I am pretty so like techie, I would say to some degree, but no, have never used it. So yeah,
I'm curious. So this is, you know what? Let me give you where my prompts came in. Because I think this could be cool too. If anybody's watching or listening and is not using ChatGPT or AI that much, this could be a cool little excerpt. So based off the feedback I got, I rewrote my question to, I said, I am interviewing someone who works for HR at blank for my podcast on women's empowerment, entrepreneurship. I need 10 questions that listeners who are interested in going into corporate work and or what it's like being a woman in a tech environment would want answered.
Okay.
So it gave me 10 great questions, but they were specifically about the place you work. So it was about the firm. It wasn't really about you. And I was like, these are great questions about the place, but that's not what I want. So I was about to like delete it. He's like, nope, don't delete it. You just give it more feedback. So then I put, can you make these less about the firm and more about her as a person? And it gave me 10 that I liked. But some of them were about entrepreneurship more specifically. And I think that's just because my podcast is about entrepreneurship. So I'm like, okay. I was like, I don't know if she's an entrepreneur or not. So here's her LinkedIn profile. Can you make these more specific to her?
Yeah.
And here's our 10 questions. So
let's do it.
I don't know if we'll get through all 10, but maybe let me pick some out that will be good for us. Okay. So yeah, I like this one. Okay. So the very first question. Your journey includes roles in tech giants like, I'll skip that. Your journey includes roles in tech giants. So could you highlight a standout experience from your career that has significantly shaped your perspective on women's empowerment in the tech field? Particularly at tech giants.
No, all good. You know, actually going, my current place of work now, being in tech, I will absolutely say like, I think you go into companies and you want to see people who look like you. Yeah. And that was also very important for me, not just in working in tech. I think working in HR. Yeah. And so I will say like upon coming into where I work now, that is something that I have seen through and through. I think with any company, of course, like there's definitely a lot of work to be done. Right. But there are people that look like me. And I can absolutely appreciate that. I think the other part too is like, even in my business group that I support, and previous companies as well, being in tech, seeing female leaders. And I think you see
that piece.
You see that, and you want more of it when you have those like one-on-ones with those leaders to like understand like their story and their background. And you know, that simple question of like, tell me how you got here. Right. How did you get here? Right. Is this where you thought you'd be? So I can say working in tech, that is probably one of the biggest things for me that means a lot. Because I feel like you don't necessarily see a lot of women. But then I'll take that a step further. You don't see a lot of Black women. And so that part is also very important to me. It's something that is absolutely like on my goal. Like I do want to be a leader, a people leader of sorts, definitely at that executive level at some point, to lead a team. So people that look like me, or just in the event of kind of getting their start into HR, like if there's an opportunity for me to help, you know, young Black women, young Black men to do so, like I want to do that. One of my best friends is a male, and he's in HR, and I met him in my first HR job. And we timelessly would have conversations about like, we want to see people like us in HR, in these big companies at those levels. So people understand like they can do it too. Right. So for me, like seeing that, where I work now in tech, it's there, but I think there's definitely a way to go. There are some ways to go, but it's a work in progress. And I think as we kind of hit this big push for I&D, inclusion and diversity, there are a lot of efforts to look at candidates and slates of candidates around diversity. Right. So I can appreciate that. And I think the companies that I've worked with in tech are doing a great job in terms of really trying to target that. Yeah. I know it's not easy. I will say that right now. I know it is. It's not. But I can appreciate anything that companies are doing to really say, let's find that talent. Let's find that diverse talent, because that brings different perspectives, experiences, and just overall creates a much sounder company that really just allows them to grow. Absolutely. So I can appreciate that, being a Black female, Black woman in HR. And I love every bit of that.
Okay, cool. So even what you're saying right now just already gives me like a few different strands of thought. So one being that I really like you highlighted, not just am I seeing people who look like me, but in leadership. I'm seeing women leaders, because I think that was a piece that always bothered me. Just in various groups, even in higher ed, you know, working in higher ed, it would be interesting to me that majority of, we'll just say staff in general, like working in the student affairs side, is like women. Okay, cool. But then when you actually look at leadership and who's holding the roles, who are making the decisions, completely the opposite. Like you might see a woman, maybe, cross your fingers. And that is also shifting a little bit, but it's, to me, it's not shifting fast enough or big enough to actually be representative of how many people go into the field versus how many people get moved up to those levels. So I'm happy you brought that piece up, because that was one strand of thought. It was like, okay, we also want to see ourselves. We want to see that representation. We know representation matters, but it's not just representation in general. What are the actual roles, responsibilities, the power structures and power levels that are given once we see ourselves? Yeah. So my kind of follow-up question to you would be, for, let's say Black women maybe just coming fresh out of college that know that they want to work in HR maybe, or just in corporate environments in general. The importance of seeing yourself there, seeing folks who look like you versus seeing folks who look like you in leadership. Yeah. Would you recommend anything or give any advice in terms of like what companies to take a job with, to not take a job with, in terms of like what they see even? I mean, just that visual piece.
I think for me specifically, like I think sometimes initially, like out of college, like now, if I knew what I know now, what I would say is that coming out of college, and I'd say probably at your like sophomore, junior, senior year, internships. Like I feel like internships are out here, and they're phenomenal in terms of what companies are doing. So like I would say, if you're looking, and not even within HR, but if you're looking to get out there, like, and just see what a company is about, an internship is the best opportunity, I feel like, to really take, just for the fact that it gives you maybe 6 months, 3 months, 9 months to really be with a company to see, like, is this a place that I potentially could see myself long term? And if so, like start building those connections, building those relationships so that like, yes, you know, maybe that's the next year that they do internships. They think about you, right? I think the other part too is, and I'll say this, and I think it's just being a Black woman as well, is that I've had even specifically, like I think about my mom who's worked in HR.
Right.
And then I jokingly, I call her my work mom. She works in HR as well. But like, it's all about like those things that they tell you, like those little tidbits of information of like, did you know this? And I feel like I've been fortunate because one, my mom works in HR. So like I had that opportunity to like kind of ask questions, whether it was to her or my work mom, just to really to understand, like, as people say, like, how do you play the game?
Yeah.
Like, because that is ideally what you're doing as you get into these spaces. Like you have to know how to move, right? How you conduct yourself in these settings. And especially as you think about it from the setting of like a Black male, a Black female, looking to work our way up, right? And so one piece of advice that I would totally stick to is that as a underrepresented ethnicity, like building connections with people, because some of that advice that they will give you, you may not get.
Yep.
And I have been fortunate because I've had people that, of course, have been in my corner. But for some people that maybe don't, like, I'm happy to be that resource, because there are a lot of things that I think we as African Americans and Black people may not necessarily understand or may just not know. And because we don't know what we don't know. And therefore we lose out on certain opportunities, certain things that we may see our peers have.
Right.
And that's where I'm like, I think it's so important. So like, ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And I will tell you this, I am not the greatest at asking for help. I am not. I am all about, I'll figure it out. Like, it's fine.
Yep.
But in these situations, like, if somebody wants their foot into HR, like, I am more than willing to give that, because
I love that.
That's how I got to where I am. And I think in terms of wanting to be a leader, like, you have to be willing to help.
Yes.
We've all had mentors along the way, and we didn't get to where we are just by ourselves.
Yeah.
We had help of others. And whether that help may have been small, whether that help may have been big, those are the relationships that you absolutely should hold on to, continue to develop, because you never know who that person may know. And that will go distances for you, undoubtedly, in your career.
Agree. That's a huge, powerful piece of advice. And I would add to it with this asking piece, right? You have to ask.
Yeah.
You have to ask for advice. You have to ask for help, whatever that's going to look like. Don't be, how do I say it? Don't be limited in who you ask would be the ad that I would put on there. So we want to see people who look like us. If they're there, ask.
Yes.
Ask. If they're not, ask whoever is there.
Yes.
Because you never know. Somebody doesn't have to look like you to share with you, to teach you. And you can always make it your own. I think that's part of playing the game, is maybe you don't see yourself in the space currently. But if you can see yourself in the future, you're going to have to learn from everybody that's done it before you, whether they look like you or not.
Yeah.
And I think one more tangent on that, I think one more piece is what I learned that was hard for me to learn. I think in business in general, they always say, get used to rejection.
Yeah.
But when you're working for a company, when you're working for any person, people are people. So the ask needs to come without expectation.
Yep.
And I think that's when we get the best wisdom, the best rewards from it. Because when you're willing to give back and put out and help others, that will come back to you. Yeah. But it's not going to come from everybody. So if you can ask people openly, but never expect an answer, then it's not really rejection. Like, it's not rejection unless you're expecting something from them.
Totally. And I think the other part to that too is, like, my dad would always tell me, like, you have to be okay with people telling you no. Yeah. And I think for a while, like, growing up, you're like, someone's gonna tell me no, like, there's no way. And then you think about it, and it's like, it's so true. When you get into these spaces, whether that's corporate, entrepreneurship, people are gonna tell you no all day long. It's more of like, how do you rebound from that? Yes. It could be no now. It doesn't mean that it's no later. So I think, like, that's another piece of feedback that I think about in terms of, like, just being in my career, whether it's a job that you really want. It may be a no now. It doesn't mean it's a no a year, 6 months, 9 months later. Like, so it's being prepared with knowing, like, do you have a backup plan? You got to have one. And who's to say that like everything isn't going to materialize the way that you think it is? And I say that based on like how I got here. I never thought that this would be a possibility for me. And then it happened and it was like, oh my gosh, dream of a lifetime, right? So you just never know. So I think the thought is also like managing your expectations, but also knowing that just because it's a no doesn't mean that it's a no forever. So you have to be willing to put yourself back out there. And we're all human. We're all going to make mistakes. We're probably not always going to rebound the best way when we're told no, but it's all in how you grow in that. And I think one of the biggest pieces of advice is too that I've gotten is that in those situations where you're uncomfortable, those are the moments where you grow the most. And so I think it's great when you're doing things and you know how to do them and you're comfortable. Like that's right. That's everything. We live for those moments, but it's the moments where you are truly uncomfortable and you're like, let me take a risk. Let me step out there. Let me try something different. And if you fail, if you are uncomfortable, I guarantee you that is going to make you a much stronger, better, overall, well-rounded individual. And it will help you grow, whether you want to believe it or not. But I guarantee you, those are the moments that you remember more than the moments of you being comfortable. Right. And that I can always appreciate.
Oh, I love that. I was listening to a sermon this morning, like a recorded one on YouTube from Darius Daniels. He has this series called Managing Meltdowns, right? And I listened to the first episode. This was a while back now. It's been on YouTube for a while. So I listened to this like first part one, I guess, of the series a long time ago. It was great. Sent it to a friend. Didn't really think anything else of it. Well, that friend was like, did you listen to the rest of the series? And I was like, huh? What? No. She's like, girl, there's 5 parts. You're missing out. So I started listening to this one today. It was like, okay, you know, like, let me just get a little bit of my own worship and my Jesus time in this morning. Yeah. And he said something. I'm not going to be able to quote it directly right now because I need to watch it like 3 more times before I do that. But he said something about helping people who don't want to be helped. Yeah. Right. And where we put ourselves into situations. So to your piece on when we're uncomfortable, we grow more. He was explaining that you also could be taking away from somebody's blessing and gift if you pull them out of a trial that they're supposed to be in.
Yeah. I agree with that.
And that there's a lot of us, and I'm saying us because I resonated with it. There's a lot of us who learn from challenge. Yes. Like, you can tell me all the advice, you can tell me everything you learn, but I may not learn it myself until I do it myself, until I try it, until I went through it the hard way, right?
Yes, I resonate with you. I'm laughing at because I'm like, that's me. Like,
a little bit hard-headed, but
it's
okay.
It's all right. You know, and that's what I feel like people say, like, yep, I'm like, I am stubborn. Like, when people are like, what is a flaw you have? Like, I'm stubborn. Stubborn for the fact that, yes, I'm very independent. I am all about, like, I got it. It's cool. Yeah. But I will fail trying to, like, nope, it's okay. I won't need help. I won't ask. But I will learn, and then I will eventually do it and be like, I probably could have had some help.
Yeah, yeah. And then I'm going to come on a podcast and share the lessons later because hoping somebody else listens instead of trying.
Yes, but I'm like, it's okay. It happens to all of us. So I feel like as long as we learn from it. But yes, that is me. So I resonate with that too.
You know, there's pros and cons to that, though, because I think the same people who can hear advice but not necessarily apply it until they do it themselves, right, and are going through the process, we're trial and error folks. I think we also have the backside of that, the plus, the skill, the light side, is that we don't always take things at the word. So that allows us to have more of an open perspective, especially when it comes to people. So it's like, yeah, you may tell me this advice of like, don't do that. I've been there. It was terrible. Do this instead. When you're telling me do and don't do something, I'm definitely going to be like, what's in the middle? What's in the middle? But I would do the same thing with people. If you're telling me don't go around that person, don't like them, and I'm like, well, that's a perspective. Yeah. And for us in completely different roles in terms of our work, our career, but still working with people and connecting with people on a regular basis, I think that's a light that we also have to highlight. So if you're one of those people like us who are resonating with some trial and error and you've got to go through the hard stuff on your own. Yeah.
And it's good though. But I also think too, like people say, and we laugh about all the time, like giving somebody some grace. Yes. Like, you know, and so I do think that
you never know.
You just don't know. I think at the same time, like you don't know what somebody may be going through. And maybe they do need to go through that situation to find it out themselves. And so you just, you want to be able to help them. And I'm like, I get that. But sometimes, like, yeah, they do need to go through that themselves. And I think it's also always like that twofold moment of they come back to you and they're like, yeah, I probably should have listened, but I went through it. And you're right.
Now
like,
I appreciate it.
Yes,
yeah.
And I appreciate it. So I'm like, it's a win-win either way. But I can
Absolutely.
appreciate those moments because it is trial and error. But like, those are things that I feel like you do it once, I'm almost positive you won't do it again.
Yeah.
Because you learn from it. So, hey.
Absolutely. And it adds to the list. Like, it gets us more informed in the decisions we're making, even if we don't do exactly what you tell us. We're still making informed decisions based on that being a factor. Okay, let me jump to the next question before we get too much into trials.
Let's do it.
Okay, you were talking about kind of the folks who have been instrumental in your life, and there was a question on here I remembered that was like, oh, this one's gonna be good. Okay. So in terms of the folks who have given you advice in these pieces, one of the questions drafted here, mentorship can be instrumental for personal and professional growth. So have you had a mentor who guided you through your career, and how do you envision mentorship playing a role in empowering future generations?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in terms of mentorship, I think the biggest piece was upon prior to getting into tech, I knew I wanted to switch. I wasn't really too sure of what that was in terms of like, I wanted to go to another company. Yeah. And I think through talking to my mentor, it was like, you have some really great experience, but know that now it's your time to be picky. And I'm like, what does that mean? Like, what do you mean? And she told me, like, you could probably go anywhere, but think about, like, now it's your time to think about the opportunities that are in play for you and truly figure out what it is that you want, what it is that you don't want. And think back to all of the previous jobs and experiences you've had. What are the things that you've loved? What are the things that you've hated? But also, what are the things that, like, maybe you want a little bit more? And so I think, like, that was probably some of the best advice that I've gotten in terms of my career. Because, one, it got me to where I am. But also, through that, being able to interview with different companies and realize, and you go through interviews and you just wonder, like, why not me? Right? Or, like, why is someone not willing to take the chance on me? And so I think in those moments, you're definitely frustrated. And it's like, when is it going to end? Right? And so, like, I'm going back to my mentor and it's just kind of like, I don't know what to do. But then it's like, that just means, like, that opportunity, like, that's not the one for you. Yep. Right? And so, like, I think just going through that and really thinking about, like, what it is that I wanted. And then literally, people say, like, things happen when you don't expect them to happen.
Yes.
And
all
so
the best things do.
As I ended up at the company where I am now, like, it was so unexpected. They had reached out to me. And
did they?
Yeah. It was just it was on LinkedIn. I had been interviewing for some time. Yeah. And just kept feeling like, when is this going to come? Because you saw everybody on LinkedIn, like, getting job offers. They're starting a new job. And I'm like, why is this not
That's how it always feels when you're looking for something.
Yes, right? Yes. And so that happened. And I'm like, no way. Like, opportunity, company of a lifetime, job of a lifetime. How did this come to be? And so I feel like in that moment, it was just like, you go through the interview process. Of course, they're asking, like, what is it that you want in this next opportunity? Right. What are the things that you love? What are the things that you don't love? And then it's like you get to that finish line, an offer is made, right? And so that other part, I know, as you mentioned earlier, like, it's negotiating, right?
Yes, that was going to be my next question. Perfect.
Another big point of, like, advice that I will give to us as Black people, African Americans, underrepresented ethnicities, like, negotiate. And companies expect you to negotiate. Do not leave money on the table. Do not leave it. And I can't say that enough. Like, the worst you're going to hear is no. But I would much rather somebody go for it and hear a no than not go for it, because you never know what can happen. Yeah. And so I say that to say, got the offer, of course, negotiated, right? And then, offer takes place, end up accepting. And I think in that moment, like, it was just, like, trivial. Like, I can't even express what that feels like, but it's like, your dream has come true. Yeah. And so, like, you think about all of that time before, that you were interviewing and it didn't work out, or people told you no, like not right now, like we went with somebody else, and to see how things like played through.
Yep.
That moment was everything. And I feel like I think about it now as I talked to my mentor today, like just in telling her, like, I made the right decision, and I won't regret that for anything. And so I will say, like, when you get to a certain point in your career, be picky. You should be choosy because you can. You have the background, you have the experience. Like, you should be able to pick the company that you want, have that in mind, and know, like, at some point, like, that may happen for you. And so be choosy. Don't feel like because a company came to you, you go through a process, they offer you, that you have to take it.
Yeah.
It should be about what you want, like what's going to make you happy. And so that would be like one of the best pieces, I would say. Like, it's being choosy.
Yeah.
And when you're choosy, like it's good things that come to you.
Yes.
Because it's not taking the first thing that's thrown at you. It's taking the time to do the work, to do the reflection, like what could I have done better, to really prepare yourself for that next big opportunity. And when it happens, it's a moment of a lifetime.
Right. And I think that applies to multiple spaces, like workspaces, relationship wise, even just, eventually getting a home or whatever that big goal is for you, the right car, the dream car, like whatever that's going to be. It's reminding me of this piece, as we're talking about like the mentorship side of it. And growing into it, one of the pieces of advice I got around that negotiation was ask for a number that makes you uncomfortable.
Yes.
And I was like, what? Because I'm like calculating, okay, this is what they asked. And if I were to put a value or a number to each of these skills that I also have that they're probably not adding in, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm trying to like really calculate this number, right?
Yeah.
And I like remember sharing it with somebody who was kind of mentoring me at the time. Because like I have a lot of seasonal mentors. I don't have a lot of like lifelong mentors. But in that season, I had a particular mentor that I was like, okay, so I feel like this makes sense for what I'm doing. And I looked up these people's and blah, blah, blah. They're like, okay, good. Now add to it. And they're like, you feel good with that number? I'm like, yeah, I feel good with that number. I feel like I'm worth that. I can ask for it. So they're like, you're worth more. Yeah. That was the piece I like. Yes. Whatever number you feel like you're worth, you're worth more.
Yeah.
Ask for more. Worst they can say, as you already said on this, right? Worst they can say is no.
I love that, because I think the other part to that too is like, I joke about it, and Sarah will say this too. I feel like, look, I'm the HR friend of my friend groups. So it's like, anytime someone's like, hey, I have an HR question, like, do you have a second? I'm like, yeah, like, give me the lowdown, give me the rundown. I will absolutely like give you like my thoughts, feedback, recommendations, suggestions, whatever that is.
Yep.
And so, yeah, like I think when we think about like negotiations and things like that, like we sometimes feel comfortable in asking for like what's comfortable for us.
Yes.
But I'm like, do not sell yourself short, because at the end of the day, like, I guarantee you, what you may have been wanting and didn't ask for, I guarantee you, they could have done. And so that's where I know it's tough. And believe me, I work in HR, and I feel like even in negotiating, sometimes I'm like, and then my mentor's like, stop it. Like, you think your peers are out here questioning this? Like,
right.
No.
Right.
Okay. So yeah, like I honestly would say, like, I know it's uncomfortable. It is. Yeah. It will always be. And I think to that point, like, money is an uncomfortable topic. Let's be real. It is. But I think when it comes to a job, this is something that everyone is preparing for. Like, we prepare to get to these spaces that we're in. So when it comes down to like compensation, what is it that you're wanting? What is it that you're looking for? Do not shy away from that. Do not hesitate. Like, I can't say that more enough, just for the fact that when it does come and they tell you like, hey, we can meet you there, that is probably the best feeling in this world of knowing, like, I negotiated. Aren't you happy you did that?
Yes.
And worst case scenario, if they said no, it could be no to that, but maybe it's yes to something else.
True.
So thinking about
other
like
benefits,
maybe, other benefits, there could be other things that they are willing to negotiate on. So never shut that door, because you never know what's there or what's behind that second door. And that second door may completely have you thinking differently of like, I'm so glad I did this.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. And just in general, this piece that you're talking about of really just not giving up that I was hearing like within this mentorship side is, I think, I'm going to say generally, but especially for for Black folks in general, I think I've seen so many unrealized dreams in our community just because we were told no so many times and we put a number on it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to keep going after this many times. Yeah. But the folks who I see actually realize their dreams to the point where they're like, this is my dream. Now I can go for a new one. I can go for a better dream, whatever it is. It's just because you received the no's in a way that you kept going. Yep. Not one that was pushing you down. So don't think of the no's as pushing you down the stairs. Yep. Each no is another block on the stairs that to get you closer to the dream.
I don't want to use the word trigger, but like that should motivate you. Yeah. And I get sometimes like you are going to have those dark days of like, I just don't want to. And I get that. But I'm telling you, like you have to. I mean, you got to keep pushing. Yep. Because let's think about it. The people that we see in these roles that look like us, you think they sat back and took no for an answer? Right. And I'm sure they took no several times before they got to where they are. So I think that is just story enough to say that they did it, so can we, but we got to keep at it. Yeah. And I feel like the more and more that we continue to see us, the better off we'll be. And I think about that even from like a mentorship capacity and what that means to me. Like that's everything. Because I want to see more people that look like us in these positions that maybe we never thought could be a thing or maybe it's entering into something new, but you got to get out there. You got to make an outreach. And I know outreach is never easy, but you never know who a person knows either. And I think most times too, when we look at jobs, it's not about what you know. It's about who you know. So keep that in mind because I feel like it's all about relationships and you never know who somebody may know and how that may shape your future at the end of the day.
Oh my gosh, you've dropped so many gems. Like just things I wasn't even expecting to be like, like I need to write this down. This is like career growth 101. Like everybody needs to hear this. These are awesome tips. So I kind of have like 2-part question to wrap us up. Okay. So the first part of it is what do you envision or just forecast the future of HR to be?
You know, honestly, I feel like HR has definitely shifted. I think shifted since I've been in it. I think HR is slowly starting to make a name for itself in terms of like people I think are starting to see like what is HR. And I think it's moving away from that negative perception around it. And so I think people are seeing like, hey, HR is definitely shaping the way that companies show up and show up from I&D, show up from a cultural aspect. Like it's helping shape a lot of these companies. And I think HR is a workhorse. Like we're not revenue generating. So I shout out to all the revenue generating roles that are out there. HR is not one. So when I tell you like we are steaming, burning the midnight oil, we are, but I think
but you
that
keep
HR
the company alive.
Yeah, we are shaping, and I think we're trying to do really good about the candidate experience, right? The employee experience. So it's definitely shaping, and I think it's getting better because I think people are slowly starting to recognize like this is HR, and HR has so many different facets and so many different spaces that, hey, we're here just like you all. We love it, but we're really trying to make way and make way in the way of having people and allowing companies to show up with their best foot forward.
Yeah, I love that. Then on the personal side, part 2 of the question would be, what do you envision the future being for Mykle?
Yeah, you know, future for me is I absolutely like I love being an HR business partner. I would love to lead a team of HR business partners at some point. I've loved so much about what I've experienced across different industries. I do love tech. People have asked because prior to supporting tech, like I was in a sales environment, still in an HR business partner capacity, but supporting sales groups. Yeah. And that was also a whirlwind of fun in the auto finance capacity. So for me, it's definitely leading a team and taking everything that I've learned through the mentorship that I've had, through my personal experiences, both challenging, more challenging than that, challenging but great experiences, and being able to pour that into the people that would report to me. Because I think we see and we know what great leaders are. We see the leaders we don't want to be, right? And so I think it's taking those things, attributes, skills, experiences, and pouring that into, allowing that to make me into the leader that I am and would like to be someday, to lead a team. And just be successful and help people grow in that aspect and get to where they want to be.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Good. Okay. Bonus question.
Yeah.
Super random. You can pass or not. Is the love of your life in Texas, California, or elsewhere?
I would say, so I am absolutely single. But do I think my future husband is in California? Probably not. To be honest, I don't think he's here.
You never know.
That is so true. We never know, but I feel like he's probably not in the state of California.
So if you're in California hearing this and you're like, it would be a dream to date Mykle, you better get on it quick because she's going to leave your butt in California.
California's cool. Like, it can be a little thing. It could be, we can put together a little plan. I'm all about a plan. But yeah, long term, California. Well, yeah, I don't think my man is here.
She needs that Southern love.
Yes, that Southern love. Dallas, Texas. Hey,
okay, I am messing with you, but all good things. Thank you so much for everything that you've shared, Mykle. Thank you for coming on. Lots of wisdom dropped, and we got to joke a little bit, so that made my day for sure. But is there anything you would like to leave the audience with?
No, I would say thank you again. This is never done something like this before. Fun, truly. A really great opportunity. So thank you. I appreciate you taking the time. But yeah, honestly, anybody who's looking to get into HR, please use me as a tool or a resource. I'm here. And it's not easy, but if there's something that I can do to help, I'm here to do that. So other than that, I appreciate the time.
Yay. We'll add your links in as well. But can you tell folks where to find you if they're listening?
So as Lolo joked in the beginning, Instagram is Mykle_not_Mykle. Side note by that, Mykle is Mykle.
Mm-hmm.
So hence the not Michael, which is the boy, Michael. So that's where the Instagram name comes from. Shout out to my parents for shaping my entire life around my name. So yep, here, but it's every bit of me now. So I am here for it, but was traumatized as a little kid. But all's good. And then, you can find me on LinkedIn, Mykle Douglas as well. So
perfect. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you, girl.
Appreciate it.
All done. Thank you for tuning in to the Here to Uplift podcast. New episodes are airing every week with some bonus episodes in between too. So make sure you stay tuned by subscribing, following, liking, and engaging with us to let us know what topics you're most interested in and what might inspire you along this journey. We're going to keep working hard on our end because we are here to uplift not only ourselves, but our community too, and that includes you. So I can't wait for you to hear the next episode. But for now, do your thing, let's get it, and let's keep moving forward. Uplift yourself, friends. You got this.